ego is the big one, isn't it? I think so, for so many people, that ego doesn't allow them to say, actually, I'm not very good at the CEO stuff. And there's people that could do it much better than me. Nobody really likes to, especially when it's your company that you've started, likes to come to that conclusion. But if you have a quiet self-confidence, then I think it makes it a little bit easier to accept that your skills don't lie in that area. I've never met anybody that has a complete skill set from a business perspective. We all spike in different areas, and that's the joy of teamwork.
Welcome to the Startup CEO Succession podcast, where we dive deep into the pivotal journey of founder CEOs who face the critical decision: should you continue leading your business or bring in a new leader? I'm your host, Evgeny. As a founder, coach, and author specializing in CEO succession, I interview founders, chief executives, and investors who share their stories of navigating this transition. Today, I'm speaking with Simon La Fosse, founder of La Fosse Associates, or simply La Fosse, a recruitment company headquartered in London and operating internationally. I've known Simon for many years, and there are many things I love about this story. Simon took his business from an idea to about 400 people today. But not only this, he did it without raising external investment, and he gave most of his equity away to his team, effectively creating an employee-led organization. So today he is a minority owner by choice, even though he never took any external cash. Not only that, La Fosse is known for how much it cares both for its employees and for its candidates. And that's in an industry which is known for its transactional relationship and often less than perfect experience for candidates. Simon hired a managing director to lead the business when the company was only about 40 people, and then promoted him to chief executive when the company was about 200, and very recently hired the next chief executive to lead the company going forward. So he orchestrated 2 successful CEO transitions in the company's lifetime. And looking back, we can say that no matter what happens going forward, La Fosse has been an incredible success based on its 18-year history. Enjoy the conversation. Hello, Simon. Great to have you on the show today. How are you?
Hello, Evgeny. Lovely to see you. And I'm delighted to be talking with you, actually. I've known you for a good few years now, and I've always respected massively the approach you take to business. So it feels good to be chatting with you.
Thank you, Simon. And same here. Very much looking forward to the conversation. I know a lot about the business that you built. Also have a lot of respect for how you approached it. And I would love to share the story of your business and also how you approached hiring other CEOs to run your business in our conversation today. But let's start at the beginning. You founded La Fosse in 2007 with a very specific vision. You didn't want it to be just like any other recruitment firm. Can you tell me about the founding moment and the vision for La Fosse?
Yes. In fact, I wanted it to be like no other. Our industry does a really important thing. It clearly plays a critical role in so many people's careers and helps organizations find the people they need in order to be successful. So it's massively important. But in my view, at that point, I felt it had underperformed as an industry in terms of the way it just behaved. It was fairly transactional with its clients. It was quite a dog-eat-dog environment in recruitment agencies. And candidates got a pretty poor service as well, especially the candidate that weren't necessarily going to be placed immediately by the recruiter. I'd had probably 15 years experience in recruitment before that. And what I'd seen, just behaving well, giving people time that weren't necessarily going to result in immediate income for you, paid dividends, and it just built my reputation really quickly. So I'd always intuitively felt that was a better way to do business. I had enough evidence behind me. Not only does this feel right, the evidence is there that demonstrates it's a really effective way to grow a business. And I've got quite a low risk profile. Actually, I was 42 when I started the business, and I worked for people up to that point. And I looked around the industry. I wanted to leave where I was, and I couldn't see anybody that represented those values particularly strongly. So I was kind of left with no choice but to start my own business, which I did. And one of the other things I discovered along the way as I got more experience in recruitment is there's a huge amount of value not just paid out in salary and dividends and commission, but in terms of the value that was built through growing a successful firm. Hundreds of millions of pounds were created. And it seemed to me that there was a real opportunity to build a company where, from the outset, there was a clear intention to gift. The number I landed on was 40% to the people that helped me build it. I had no IP, I had no patent, I had no specific thing that meant that the business success was all down to me. If I can grow a really successful business, 60% of a lot is absolutely fine. It was founded on two things, really: co-ownership. Everybody had a slice of the business, not just the fee earners, and care, and specifically candidate care. The care stretches three ways, obviously: to clients, but that's a kind of a given; to candidates, and not necessarily the candidates that we were going to place, but just treating human beings as human beings should be treated, and each other, just looking after each other. Really simple principles, which is great actually, because it makes it easy. You either connect with those and you want to join because you share those values, or you kind of wonder what I'm on about, in which case it's probably best that we go our separate ways. And that really resonated. So it made it easy for me to win clients. Candidates appreciated being treated better, and it made it easy to attract good people to work here because they had a share of the business, and they liked that approach to business.
And it made La Fosse very successful. Over the years, it achieved really a lot.
Yeah, it was funny because you haven't got a clue. I mean, you'll remember when you started a business and you moved from getting a salary every month to nothing, and knowing that the only money that's going to come in is if you win some business, and then you're able to invoice a client for it. And so that moment was quite a frightening one. I had 3 young children at the time and a hefty mortgage, but from day one it was successful, and we grew it pretty fast.
Yeah, and it sounds so simple on the surface. Treat people well, look after the candidates, find employees who are focused not on transactional relationships but on long-term meaningful relationships. And that's not how the recruitment industry operates, or at least operated when you founded La Fosse.
No, for sure. But what I found was that, in my view, people are inherently good. So if you show them that as a way, it's a nicer way to behave. It makes everything a bit more pleasant, and it's really effective. I think you do have to focus on it, and of course there's loads of challenges. You spend too much time looking after candidates that you'll never be able to place, then you're not going to be effective. So there's a balance there, the commercial balance you've got to strike. But there's a lot of space between that and ignoring everybody unless they're commercially viable for you in the next month or so.
Yeah. And how do you see the difference between a share option plan that nearly every company has, EMI incentives or something similar, and the company being co-owned, which is what you've done?
Yeah, so we had a share option scheme. The difference though was it wasn't 5 or 10%, it was 40% plus. We didn't restrict the stock. Everybody came in and had it, from the receptionist to anybody that was working for us. And that was a really important principle for me as well. Everybody was contributing to the success of the company, so everybody should benefit. So yeah, it was 40% that I'd committed to grant over time.
And if I'm not mistaken, since then it went even higher. So today you're not a majority owner anymore.
Yes, no, you're right. Very recently, so in the last 18 months, we became officially employee owned, which meant that we sold, myself and the other shareholders, i.e. The employees, sold 51% of their stake. And so we are now a majority. We are officially an employee-owned organisation. I think I probably was waiting until I felt comfortable giving up control of the company, because technically I don't have control of the company anymore.
It's fascinating because so many venture-backed companies start by trying to give away as little as possible, and then they get diluted in the process. And you started without any external capital, built a successful, profitable, fast-growing company, and in the process completely voluntarily give back control, creating an employee-owned organization in the process.
Yeah, it's funny, the first bit was very old school, wasn't it? The idea of creating a profitable company and growing from reinvesting your profits. It somewhere feels feels quaint now, but that's what we did. And you know what? I think if we'd had a big injection of capital, we would have messed it up. We weren't capable of growing any faster than we did. As on average, over the first 15 years, it was like 30% per annum. And that was definitely the limit of our ability. I think if we'd had outside capital and we'd been tempted to hire much faster, maybe set up international offices much faster, then I suspect we wouldn't have done it as well.
And when you think about the values of the organization, I imagine it hasn't always been easy to really uphold them, especially maybe during some of the more difficult moments. What was that like for you as a founder?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And of course you don't intentionally not uphold them, but you suddenly find that something's happened or you've done something that has meant you haven't been true to your values. I think there are two really significant occasions when that happened in our history. The first was when we got a little bit carried away with ourselves. Something like 2015, and we grew by 50% in 1 year in terms of headcount. And we were a relatively young management team, and simply the intentions were all good, but we just weren't capable of managing and looking after and supporting and training and mentoring those people. And it became obvious that people were becoming disenchanted and the culture was therefore wobbling. So the next year we just said, right, we're not going to expand. Forget growth. This is about honouring our values and our principles. We didn't grow at all. In fact, we ended up at a slightly smaller number at the end of that year. But we were able then to, one, develop and mature as a management team, and secondly, do the right thing by the people that had started with us. We didn't maintain the standards that we always thought we would. We definitely slipped. But there was also another test there, which is when you've done it, are you going to let it go or are you going to sort it out? And sorting it out was not easy, and it took some real compromises. And the second one, I was probably even more embarrassed about actually, was during COVID. There was a time when we couldn't see an end to it really, and trading was massively down. And we put a number of people on furlough, and then at the end of that period, we let them go. And whilst those things were necessary for the business and they were the right thing to do, what we didn't do is we didn't look after those people whilst they were on furlough. They were obviously still our employees then. You know, it's easy to make excuses for it as well. We didn't really know what to say to them in truth. We didn't think that there was going to be the work for them to be able to come back at the end of the furlough period. But that was no excuse. We should have been communicating with them, we should have been talking to them, we should have been looking after them better than we did, especially as we're an organisation that, you know, espoused the ideas of care. And there was one thing in particular, and I'm deeply sad about that, when they were asking for money in lieu of holiday. We said, no, just take your holiday allowance. And I hadn't realised that had happened. And that probably more than anything really upset them, because of course they had an uncertain future and we weren't being sympathetic in terms of just giving them some more cash for that. We were able to reverse that when we realised that was a decision that had been made. And it doesn't make it right, but it was definitely better than just saying, oh, well, that's happened, we made a mistake, and brushing it under the carpet. So it was a collective mess up, really. But as I said, a failure of leadership, that's my responsibility. We definitely learned a lot from it.
Yeah. And Simon, it takes real strength and honesty to acknowledge all of this. I remember I was taking my own team through some cuts during the first half of 2020 as a result of COVID, and part of my own team was on furlough. So I do remember that it was not an easy situation for any business leader. But as you've said, it's very easy to point to some excuses. And I just want to acknowledge that it takes real strength to name those mistakes instead of brushing them under the carpet.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So, Simon, even though you founded the company and you took no external financing, you are not a CEO anymore. You hired a CEO to run the business fairly early on. Can you tell me about your thinking about the process and the timeline?
I was lucky, actually. I didn't specifically look to hire a CEO. An individual called James Parker joined the business in a management role in 2010. And he just progressed really quickly, did a great job managing people. Management is definitely not my strength, and it was very much a strength of James's. And that became more and more obvious. So he took on more and more responsibility over the next 3 years. And by 2013, I felt confident enough, and we're still quite a small company then. I think we're probably 40, 50 people, something like that. I felt confident enough in his ability to be able to promote him to managing director. And I did that in 2013. And he did a great job. And the company continued to grow. And in recognition of that, when we were, I think it was about 2017, I made him CEO of the company. I took even more of a step back from the front line. And at that point, we were a pretty significant company, 150, 200 people, something like that. And my role then was just to mentor him, really, and guide him and focus a little bit more on the strategy and perhaps some of the bigger decisions we were taking.
Yeah. And how did your own responsibilities change when you promoted James to an MD position?
Yeah, my responsibilities changed. I think that I was able to focus. I didn't have to focus on the day-to-day detail. At that point, the company just becomes a bit more complicated. You've got to have a good finance function. You've got to start thinking about a marketing team, HR team, and day-to-day trading as well. So there's just a lot going on. It was almost like having two people at the top, really, but we worked very well together. There was no clash, and we thought in a very similar way about what good business is all about. So we just worked hand in glove, really. I'd hesitate to call it the more strategic things on board, but certainly things like new service lines, perhaps focusing on some of the international expansion we did. We worked really closely together during that period. So it was a good time, actually. It felt like a really rewarding time. I don't think that ever felt like we were treading on each other's toes or we would disagree. We never disagreed about anything fundamental. I think we have a very similar value system, and that just made things much, much simpler. It comes down to your value system, and if you've got a different one to the people you work closely with, then I think that does make things very difficult.
Yeah. And how did you think about hiring an internal candidate versus an external candidate?
Well, it was so organic, and it was almost like it was an experiment I could just run with. I was convinced at that time that he was ready for managing director of a company of that size. The trick was helping him develop as fast as he needed to develop as the company continued to grow, because I think the requirements are very different. The job description becomes very different as the company gets bigger. I never considered hiring externally. I just thought this person can definitely take a lot of the stuff I'm doing, do it well, and do it better than me. In fact, that made it a very easy decision.
And that's a real testament to James's skills, because you founded a recruitment company. You're an expert in recruitment. So if anything, you've got the skills and the network and the tools to find the best candidates. And yet you decided to trust the person that has already been in the business for a few years.
Yes. And that's a massive privilege, having that person in the business. As managing director of a business that you've grown from nothing is a pretty emotive thing, and trying to assess somebody's suitability for that in a few interviews is a pretty tricky thing. But when you work with somebody for 3 years, you've got a pretty good sense of whether they're going to be able to handle that job at that point in time.
And what changed when James was promoted to a CEO? The company was about, you said 150, 200 people at that point.
Yes. Yeah. And for me, that was a very real desire for James to step up, not just in terms of running the operational day-to-day, but to step up and think more strategically about the business. And I was keen, again, there's just so much going on. It felt like if he could take some more of that responsibility, then I'd have like the quiet time to make good decisions and think about things more deeply than you are able to if you're just running at 100 miles an hour.
So he took a step up and you took a step back, being available to mentor and support, but being even less involved in running the business day to day.
Yes. And I think if you ask people in the business, they'd probably say that they knew I was sitting quite closely behind James in terms of some of the key decisions. But again, the personalities and the respect we had for each other meant that wasn't a problem. But it was still certainly in terms of the bigger decisions, a kind of joint decision-making process.
And then, if I remember correctly, James ran the business as a CEO for the following 5 years.
Yeah. Up to 2022, I think. And then we got to what felt like quite an inflection point. We had developed internationally. We had developed a number of different service lines, some outside of recruitment. In fact, a big, really big part of our business, I think will become an even bigger part of our business in the future, is La Fosse Academy, which is a recruit, train, and deploy business. So we find people, select them, train them in coding, and then deploy them on with our clients for 2 years, and then the client takes them on themselves. And that is a very different service and product line. So we were probably 300-400 people by then. And it felt like, I think to James and I, that the stuff that the CEO needed to do was probably less in line with what James wanted to do, whilst this fast-moving entrepreneurial company was very exciting for him early on. I think when it came to perhaps some of the more prosaic things you have to concern yourself with when you're at that stage and thinking about heading to 1,000 people, is a lot more process, a lot more structure that you have to put in place. It's a lot about program delivery. And I don't think that was James's strength. I think he'd probably be the first to say that was the case. So I think it became clear to both of us that some kind of a change was needed. And we parted company in 2022 on really good terms, which was just a lovely thing to be able to do. I have such a debt of gratitude to the value added to the company. There's no doubt about it. We wouldn't be anywhere like the company we are today if it wasn't for him. And he walked away with a big chunk of the company, which was not something that was a contractual obligation, but something certainly that felt right after he'd contributed so much over so many years. I think I owed him a lot, and the company and everybody in it owed him a lot. And that meant, I think that really helped. So that was a life-changing amount of money for him. And he's moved out to the US now and had a complete career change and become a really accomplished artist. So he's at another stage in his life. I think it would have been a tough environment if we'd continued on the same path, trying to develop in the way that we needed to develop as we were getting bigger, without a leadership change at the top. And certainly those skills, I don't possess either. So we needed somebody that could bring that to the table.
So it sounds like James really deserves credit for taking the company from roughly 40 people as an MD to roughly 400 people when he left as a CEO over that nearly decade. And you deserve the credit for first seeing the potential in James when the company was still very small, and then realizing many years later that even though his track record is incredible, going forward as the company is looking in the direction of 1,000 people, the company needs a different leader.
Yeah. No, I think that's a beautiful way to put it. I think you've summed it up perfectly.
And what happened next?
So it was a really interesting time. We needed to make a change. I certainly didn't want to try and recruit a new CEO while James was in place. I thought that would have been disrespectful to him, especially without him knowing. And so we accepted we were going to be without a CEO for a while, but that was fine. I just stepped back into that role, and we went out to the market. We hired a very good search firm and thought we'd find it relatively easy to find somebody because we were an attractive company. There's a big chunk of equity on offer, average annual growth of 30%, and employee owned, and probably heading towards another event at some point in time. But we just could not find the quality of person that we needed, with the combination of the values that were important to us, that were non-negotiable, and the experience that was also critical to us. And there wasn't anybody that I felt comfortable enough with. So in parallel to that, we were kind of looking internally as well. There was an individual who would have been an obvious successor to James, but he was very young. It just seemed like a very big leap for him to make. But in the time between James leaving and their search running, there was a 6-month period where he really stepped up to the plate, and it became apparent that there was much less of a gap between what he was capable of, despite not having the track record, and what I thought he was capable of. And so it became a really easy decision. And what I didn't want to do was move him into CEO immediately. But I thought, let's make him managing director, so it gives him some credibility in the organization to make the decisions he needed to make and manage and lead in the way he needed to make. Within a few months, it was just obvious he was nailing it. And so I spoke to my chairman. I'm executive chairman, I have a non-exec chairman who's been absolutely invaluable as a counsel over the years, Jonathan Mackay. And we had a good old discussion about it. And in fact, Jonathan said, yeah, I can see everything you're saying. He is exceptional. He's doing an exceptional job. I just feel that it's a bit soon. You've only had him as managing director for a few months. A bit soon make him CEO. Why don't you keep the powder dry for a while? And I just thought, no, I kind of trusting my gut on this one. And he was pretty much doing the job of CEO. So we took the leap, and with Jonathan's blessing, and promoted him very quickly. It was less than 6 months, I think, into the job as CEO. He's been doing it for about 18 months now, and the organization is being absolutely brilliantly led by him. But the extraordinary thing is that he's managed to come in as such a young and relatively, well, obviously inexperienced, never been CEO before, had come in to a new role and just grabbed it so effectively without having the prior experience of knowing what to do in that role. He's also recruited some great people around him. I think we're at possibly the most exciting point in the company's journey so far right now, which feels like a curious thing to say 17 years on, and with me taking less and less of a role at the company.
Yeah. So it sounds like there are two big lessons here. One is that as a founder, you chose to trust someone that you knew, again, even though you had access to the best candidates on the market. And from the perspective of someone who wanted to be promoted into the MD or CEO role, it was possible to effectively prove their skills inside the business instead of going and getting a CEO job on the open market.
Yes, I think there's so much to be said for people where you work well together. You understand them so well. You know their track record, you trust them, they know the business, they're well respected in the business. That cuts down so much of the risk. And whilst I undoubtedly interviewed charismatic people who had achieved magnificent things, nobody felt as right as Ollie did, despite the fact that he was by far the least experienced of those candidates.
Yeah. And I really notice your choice of language here. You said that it felt right. Again, with decades of experience in recruitment, like I said, if anyone knows recruitment, it's you. It wasn't just a rational decision of building a scorecard and some metrics and figuring out which candidate gets the highest scores. You trusted your intuition about who is right for the business, even though he did not have the longest track record at the time.
Yes, well, he certainly had a long track record with us, but yes, he obviously didn't have experience as a CEO. But we talk about this. We talk about intuition and trusting your gut. But Malcolm Gladwell wrote a really interesting book called Blink that I'm pretty sure you probably read. He describes it's not just, finger in the air or, do I like this person? It is something much more structured, logical, precise, and accurate. Because you say it doesn't sit on a scorecard, I think we're inclined not to trust it. But I think you should. I don't think everybody should necessarily. But I think when you've got the weight of evidence, where you've known somebody for a long period of time, I think you really can trust what we call our intuition. I think you should probably be much more careful about trusting your intuition, having met somebody for 2 or 3 times in an interview situation, because so much of what you're assessing there is their ability to interview well.
And it also strikes me that La Fosse seems to be the kind of company that really helps individuals develop and grow. Both James and Ollie really accelerated their careers while working for La Fosse. Is it a deliberate approach to really develop your people?
Without a shadow of a doubt. And I remember, don't know if I'm going to get this quote right, but it was a very powerful one to me. Employees first, customers second. And this idea that, what in a service business, who had the nerve to say we're putting customers second? And the moment you got into his philosophy, you just went, oh yeah, I absolutely get it. If you put your employees first and you look after them, what are they going to do for your clients? They're going to look after them, right? If, however, you're telling everybody to look after your clients, but you're not looking after your employees, well, it's not you that's going to be looking after your clients. It's going to be your employees. And if your employees aren't happy, you can't just tell them to look after clients. They're not going to want to. And they won't be doing it with any passion or any integrity. I haven't been quite as punchy as saying with clients, we're putting you second. But I think that's definitely been the focus of the business, which is if you've got really outstanding people, well-trained, well-motivated, with a good value system, your clients are going to be outstandingly well looked after.
And Simon, what's next for you?
Oh.
Now that the second CEO is running the business, and you're not majority owner anymore, so you don't have full control, ultimate control of the business. What's next for you?
Well, I'm 60, so I feel like I am slowing down, and I've got less energy than I used to have. So it feels like a natural process. The joy for me is I'm still involved in the business. We're on an amazing journey. One of our objectives is to achieve a step change in the levels of candidate care in our industry through leading by example. So that's exciting for me to be able to continue doing that, albeit with a very, very light touch. That is probably 20% of my time, I would say now, as opposed to 100% a few years ago. So for the rest of my time, I'm definitely taking time to smell the roses and drink the coffee, or whatever the expression is. I like learning, actually. And there's something that I'm learning at the moment. It's called wing foiling. And it's a little bit like windsurfing, but it uses a foil instead. And so that's becoming quite a big passion of mine. And I'm still rubbish at it, but I'm persevering. And I remember, I love being on the water, just water sports in general. That keeps me fit. And I'm also, my wife and I are really interested in just giving back a bit. We're now financially in the position where we can. And we're not interested in messing up our children's lives by throwing it all at them. So we've had that conversation, and there's a lot of work to be done to work out where best to allocate those resources, and how to go about that. And that's a rewarding and enjoyable thing. So there you go. That's the next stage of my life, I think. But staying very closely connected to this company, mostly in a kind of mentoring way for Ollie. But keeping out of his way in terms of giving him the space he needs to lead, but hopefully sitting there behind him as and when he could do with some help. But that's Ollie to come to me rather than me to keep on tapping Ollie on the shoulder.
Yeah. And you also mentioned that your non-executive chairman, Jonathan Mackay. Both of us know Jonathan. He's an incredibly experienced and well-respected person in our entrepreneurial space. What was his role in navigating the evolution of La Fosse and two successive changes of leadership?
So just invaluable. He's somebody I respect deeply. He shares our values. He is really diligent, tremendous amount of experience, and brings that breadth of experience as well through all the different things he's done over the years and continues to do. And so he's been my guide, is how I describe it, really. He's been with us almost 10 years now. So he joined us when we were a small company and has been on that journey with us. And that's a special thing, really. We're very lucky We're very lucky to have benefited from his wisdom and his experience and his passion. Actually, he cares about this business, and that's a lovely thing to be able to say.
So it's almost like you're building an ecosystem of people supporting each other with different levels of experience. You being able to rely on Jonathan on your side, and then you being available to Ole and earlier James if they needed you. So it comes across as a gradual transfer of experience and wisdom and power, as opposed to just hiring one CEO, making an abrupt change, and then putting all the responsibility on their shoulders alone.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a fair comment. You could call it a conservative way of decision making, but I prefer to look at it as a kind of evolutionary approach rather than a revolutionary approach. There's been no bloodshed here, and if I had my time again, I think I'd do it in a similar way.
And are there any things you would have done differently?
Well, certainly the two things we talked about, overhiring in 2015 and not treating people as well as we could have done in COVID. Those are two regrets that I have and I can't make good. But other than that, minor regrets along the way, but by and large, it's been an amazing and rewarding journey. I would have loved to have worked a little less hard, especially when my kids were young, and have been there a little bit more for my wife and my children. Not just been there, but been a bit more present and not so exhausted at the end of a working week. I wouldn't say that's a regret. I think it's a byproduct of doing something like this. I think for me anyway, perhaps for more capable people, they could have juggled those better. But if I'd been able to manage both those things perfectly, I would have done. But I also have a responsibility to the company and a responsibility to the family to make sure that the business continued to be successful. And I definitely achieved a relatively good balance there. But you can never spend too much time with your family as they're growing up. And I think everybody given half the chance would like to spend more. And that's tricky when you've got a full-time job, especially quite a demanding job.
And how do you think about work-life balance? And how did it work out throughout the history of La Fosse? Because the impression I'm getting from you as I'm listening to you is that you are building a kind of culture where people are looked after, as opposed to being treated as resources and pushed to their absolute limit. And at the same time, you are talking about working hard and it requiring a certain level of effort, as I'm sure it did.
I think we're getting better at that as an organization. I think it's critical that we do, with the generation coming through that I don't think are interested in throwing themselves at work in quite the same way that my generation did. And I think that's a healthy thing. I think it's important for us to embrace that. And I think we have. But at the same time, you've got to keep that edge. We often say it's a marathon and not a sprint. And I think that's important to remember. The last thing we want is people to be burnt out, but at the same time, it's not a jog. Three core values are humility, care, and ambition. So if you take humility and care together, they're very complementary. And I thought it was important to have that third one there, which is ambition. So ambitious for yourself, for what you can achieve. I think, as I said, for individuals, but also for the company and also for each other. So life's a balance, right? It's all about juggling the plate. And I think it's more exciting and it's more interesting, it's more rewarding like that, but it does leave you absolutely exhausted sometimes, for sure. So there's an important piece there as well, which is when people go on holiday, we say, please turn it all off. Don't want to hear from you. There may be people listening to this going, that's a load of rubbish. I'd like to think that the management and the leadership in the organization would be considered to be supportive in that regard. But that's still one of the things that we need to do more work on, which is work-life balance. Recruitment is a tough industry. It's a demanding industry. It's a very rewarding industry as well, but it does demand a lot from you. And there's just no point, is there, working so hard that you're not in a position to appreciate the rest of your life. But what's the point in that? So we all struggle with that. And I think especially successful people are more likely to push themselves harder than they should. So it's you know that as well as anybody, right?
Well.
How do you deal with it?
Well, Not nearly as well as I wish I could. I feel like sometimes I focus too much on work, and I've got more ideas and more energy than I've got time. And at the same time, the first couple of years after I stepped down as a CEO of Makers and moved to Portugal, looking back, I think maybe I could have done a little bit more work during those couple of years, because I very much focused on just enjoying life and not working as hard as I did before that. And I guess it's
But did you enjoy that? Did you enjoy that?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So you didn't get bored?
No.
No. Oh,
No.
well, there you go. Success, absolute success, and you earned it because you left yourself in a position to be able to do that because you'd applied yourself in the way that you had, and maybe that was your reward. Perhaps you didn't have. Perhaps you worked a few too many weekends, and so you owed that time. That was all in the bank.
Well, I definitely enjoyed it.
Good.
And Simon, if you think about people in your position a few years ago who might be listening to us right now, founders, business owners who are thinking about stepping back or promoting someone to take their place as a CEO, what lessons or what advice would you like to share with them?
I think be careful what you wish for, because of course, we've had a partial exit, and certainly as far as I was concerned, that was not a particularly satisfying event, which sounds ridiculous, right? Become financially secure overnight. But I remember speaking to somebody else years and years ago who sold a company. I said, "Oh, what was it like?" It must have been absolutely fantastic. And he said, "Oh, it's really exciting when we're going through the sale process. But I tell you, it's the biggest anticlimax of my life afterwards. It's like," he said, "after we did the deal, it's like 4:00 in the morning we finished. And then the next day I woke up and he said the only thing that changed in my life was the decimal point had moved in my bank balance." It's the classic cliche, isn't it? Enjoy the journey, because that's what it's all about. It's not about the destination. So I certainly think in terms of exits, be careful what you wish for. You're going to have to find some things if you're still of the age where you've got things to do. You're going to have to find some things to occupy you that are meaningful, and there'll probably be work created. But for me, I think it's a little bit easier. I'm 60 now. I'm slowing down. It feels like the right time to be stepping back and just having an easier pace of life, enjoying a slower lifestyle. So that's nice. Not sure I've answered that at all well, to be honest with you.
Well, it will be useful to people who might be 10, 20 years behind you on this journey. Maybe building a company
Yes.
which is 20, 30 or 40 people now, and they've got an ambition to make it a real large company, but at the same time, they don't necessarily want to stay as a CEO for the next 20 years.
So, yeah, I could answer that question so differently. I would say two things. One, manage your energy and think of it as a marathon, not a sprint. So no matter how important you think it is that you do that thing this week or you hit these objectives, it's not really, as long as the company's not about to go bust. So I think try and keep some perspective. And that is difficult because it's your passion and your ambition and your unrelenting focus on not accepting second best that makes you good at what you do. But that's your greatest strength. It's also your greatest weakness because you don't know when to stop. So I would say, look at the rest of your life. The younger generation have intuitively got that balance much better. Don't burn yourself out. It's not as important as you think it is, for sure. Number one. And number two, look, again, it's all been said before, hasn't it? But surround yourself with good people. And don't just surround yourself with good people underneath you, alongside you. Like me with Jonathan or, managing directors, CEOs. There's still a very real role for me in this company, and it's probably a more enjoyable role for me now, as long as I get over the ego of not being the CEO. And that just isn't a problem for me. You don't necessarily always need to be at the top of that pile, and you don't have to own all of the value creation. I think if you can share it in a sensible way, and none of that's easy, is it? Because if you share the value and then people leave and hang on to it, then that's not great either. What you don't want is to be giving equity to people left, right, and centre. And I think this happens a lot, doesn't it, in VC-backed companies where there's a vesting cliff, and 2 or 3 years they may have a big percentage of the company just walk away, whilst the journey's not over, and you've got to still keep on growing the company. and that would have been a crazy situation to be in. So yeah, but I actually had no vesting periods, no cliffs at all. So there were just options, and there are people who have worked here for 10 years and left, and they left their share options behind, and they understood that right from the start, and that was the choice they wanted to make. We put that back into the pot so it can be given to people who are still here and still helping to grow the company. Our journey is not over.
Yeah. So in a way, you were avoiding using a cliff and a vesting structure as is customer in venture-backed companies, but instead the condition was that you keep the options as long as you remain employed by La Fosse.
Exactly.
Yeah. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and we never asked, and this is important, we never asked them to take a lower salary or a lower bonus package because we were giving them equity. That was always a gift, or because we were giving share options. That was always a gift on top of a highly competitive market, salary and bonus package. That was important to me, actually, and that was what allowed me to say, if you're here where there's an exit, you'll benefit from it, but not if you spent a few years here and then gone, because along the way we paid you a really good salary and a really good bonus structure. It's been not just market rate, but probably top quartile.
And Simon, as we're starting to prepare to wrap up our conversation, is there anything else that you would like to add or share?
Ego is the big one, isn't it? I think for so many people, that ego doesn't allow them to say, actually, I'm not very good at the CEO stuff. And there's people that could do it much better than me. Nobody really likes to, especially when it's your company that you've started, likes to come to that conclusion. But if you have a quiet self-confidence, then I think it makes it a little bit easier to accept that and not even necessarily see it as a limitation or a failure, just that your skills don't lie in that area. I've never met anybody that has a complete skill set from a business perspective. We all spike in different areas, and that's the joy of teamwork.
And as a recruiter, you would know. You've met so many candidates.
You'd like to think so, wouldn't you? Yeah, I definitely that has definitely helped my experience, for sure.
Yeah. Simon, thank you so much for taking the time to share your experience and your wisdom with our listeners today. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I know it will be so useful to many entrepreneurs out there.
Thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I always enjoy talking to you. So thank you for the opportunity.
Likewise. Thank you so much, Simon.
Cheers.
To wrap up our conversation, I would love to share some reflections. In many ways, this CEO succession is an incredible example of how to do it right. In fact, there were two CEO successions. First, Simon appointed a managing director when the business was about 40 people, and then promoted him to chief executive, and then hired another chief executive a year and a half ago when the business was about 400 people. Simon trusted his intuition, and in both cases, he promoted an insider instead of hiring on an open market, even though as a recruitment business, La Fosse had expertise and resources to find the very best candidates. Not only that, Simon trusted his intuition again when he appointed the second CEO, even though the first CEO just took the company from 40 people to 400 people. And as someone with such an experience, he was uniquely positioned to keep leading the business. And nonetheless, Simon trusted his judgment that going forward, as the business is eyeing 1,000 people, the company needs a different kind of a CEO. Simon also had the self-awareness to realize very early on that he's a stereotypical founder and not CEO, that his strength lies in founding the company, defining the values, setting the trajectory, and then trusting the management, day-to-day leadership to someone else and assuming an executive leadership position, supporting the CEO, taking part in key decisions, but not driving it day to day because someone else can do it better. And this takes self-awareness and maturity. Simon's story is an incredible example of how to build a great company that makes the world a better place, looks after its clients and employees, and makes money, and orchestrate not one but two successful CEO transitions. I think we all have something to learn from Simon. I hope you enjoyed our conversation today. If you're interested in the topic of CEO succession, check out my book, Startup CEO Succession. You will find it on Amazon. And in this book, I go into great detail about various aspects of CEO succession, sharing everything I know about this fascinating process. And if you would like to discuss your specific CEO succession, drop me a line on Evgeny at evgeny.coach, and I will get back to you sharing what I know. Please don't forget to like and subscribe on the platform of your choice, wherever you are listening or watching this podcast, and speak to you soon.